Dear friends, I've lived in Oregon for 73 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could offer. But sometimes the good Lord puts you exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be there. This story came to me through Ruth Walsh, who's been our church organist since before most folks can remember. She insists every word is gospel truth, and Ruth doesn't lie. Hasn't since she was caught sneaking cookies in Sunday school back in 1962. What happened in our little town of Cedar Falls last October still has folks talking over coffee at Mabel's Diner. Some say it was divine providence. Others say it was just human decency finally winning out over bureaucracy. But I think it's simpler than that. Sometimes a man finds his soul in the most unexpected places. Sometimes it takes losing everything to learn what's worth keeping. This is what happened when Michael Harrison met a dog named Baron. Michael Harrison's fingers were going numb, but he kept pushing them deeper into the rotted bark. The German Shepherd's amber eyes watched him, steady and patient in the gray morning light. The dog had stopped whimpering 20 minutes back when Michael first found him wedged deep inside the lightning-struck Douglas fir. "Easy now," Michael whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was calming the dog or himself. His knees pressed hard into the wet Oregon earth, pine needles working through his wool trousers. Somewhere in his coat pocket, his telephone kept buzzing. 3 lawyers from New York, probably, or maybe 4. He'd lost count of the lawsuits. The dog's ribs rose and fell in shallow breaths. How many days had the poor creature been trapped here? The tin bowls scattered around the base of the tree, some with breadcrumbs, others with water frozen from last night's cold snap, told him someone had been trying to help. Michael pulled his hand back, saw blood seeping from fresh scratches. The hollow in the tree ran deeper than his arm could reach, narrowing right where the dog's shoulders were caught. The animal must have crawled in seeking shelter from the storm last week, then gotten stuck trying to back out. "Sir?" Michael turned. A boy stood 10 feet away, couldn't be more than 11, carrying a thermos and a paper sack from Henderson's Market. Dark hair needed cutting, thin shoulders swimming in an oversized flannel jacket that had seen better days. The boy didn't speak again. Instead, he knelt beside the tree and carefully poured water from the thermos into a gap in the bark. Michael heard the dog's tongue working, desperate, wet sounds in the morning quiet. "How long has he been in there, son?" Michael asked. The boy held up both hands, fingers spread. 10 days. "Good Lord," Michael breathed, then caught himself. His wife, Sarah, would have scolded him for that. 10 days. Why hasn't anyone called for help? The boy pulled out a pencil and small notebook from his jacket pocket, wrote carefully, and showed it to Michael. Federal land, $50,000 fine to cut tree. Nobody has that kind of money. Michael stared at the note, then at the dog, then at the boy, who was now unwrapping what looked like a day-old hamburger from the market, tearing it into small pieces to push through the gaps in the bark. "What's your name, young man?" The boy wrote, "Tommy Walsh." "I'm Mr. Harrison. Michael." He studied the boy's face, something familiar in that determined set of his jaw. "Your father serve in the military?" Tommy's whole body went rigid. He wrote slowly, "Was, Afghanistan, 3 years ago." The way he wrote "was," pressing so hard the pencil nearly tore through the paper, told Michael everything. It was the kind of "was" that divided a life clean in half, into before and after. Baron, the boy wrote that was the dog's name, managed to swallow a few pieces of burger. But his breathing sounded labored, each exhale like a small prayer. "We have to get him out," Michael said. Tommy wrote frantically. "Wildlife officer said no. Judge Sterling said no. Everyone said no." "Well, they're not here now, are they?" For the first time, something shifted in the boy's expression. Not quite hope. Hope was too dangerous for a boy who'd lost his daddy. But maybe recognition. Like he was seeing something in Michael that Michael himself had forgotten existed. Michael pulled out his telephone, scrolled through until he found Jim Bradley's number. Jim had fixed the cabin's porch last month. Good, honest work for a fair price. "Jim?" it's Michael Harrison. I need you to bring a chainsaw to the federal forest marker off the old logging road, mile marker 18. Right now." A long pause. "Mr. Harrison, that's federal land." "I know what it is." "I can't cut anything there. You remember what happened to Dale Hutchins? Lost his hardware store over one tree." "I'll pay the fine." "It's not just a fine anymore. It's criminal charges. I've got a family to feed." The line went dead. Michael looked at Tommy, who was stroking Baron's nose through a gap in the bark. The dog's tail, visible through another split in the wood, gave a weak attempt at wagging. "Your grandmother know you're here?" Tommy shook his head, then wrote, "She thinks I'm at school." "It's Saturday, son." The boy almost smiled. Wrote, "She doesn't always remember what day it is." Michael stood, his knees protesting. 62 years old, more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. And here he was, kneeling in mud, trying to save a dog he'd never seen before. Sarah would have laughed at the sight. Sarah would have been right there beside him, probably already planning where the dog would sleep in their house. But Sarah was gone. 5 years now. And Michael had spent those years building walls of money and legal papers around himself, until breathing felt like something that required lawyers' approval. "Tommy," he said, and the boy looked up. "You know anyone with a chainsaw who might be less worried about federal regulations?" Tommy chewed his lip, thinking, then wrote a name. Jack Sullivan. "Where do I find Mr. Sullivan?" Maybe don't mention the federal part right away. Michael almost laughed, the first genuine urge to laugh he'd felt in months. "You're pretty clever, aren't you?" Tommy shrugged, but his eyes stayed on Michael's face, measuring him. The way you measure someone when you've been let down enough times to know better, but you're desperate enough to try anyway. Baron whimpered once, low and quiet, as if apologizing for all the trouble. "We're getting you out," Michael said to the dog, loud enough for Tommy to hear. "Today." Tommy stood up slowly, pointed at Michael's bleeding hands, then pulled a small box of bandages from his pocket. They had cartoon cowboys on them. He handed them over with the solemnity of a church deacon passing the collection plate. As Michael wrapped his fingers, watching Tommy continue to drip water through the bark for Baron, he felt something shift in his chest. Not his heart, though Dr. Peterson kept warning him about his blood pressure, but something deeper. A fault line he'd spent 5 years cementing over. It was starting to crack. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The address Tommy had penciled led Michael down a gravel road, where mailboxes stood crooked as old fence posts. Jack Sullivan's place announced itself with the smell of motor oil and the skeleton of a 1970 Chevelle rusting behind chain link. Michael's Lincoln town car looked foolish in the dirt driveway. He turned off the engine, listened to the tick of cooling metal. Through the garage's open door, work boots stuck out from under a Ford pickup that had seen better decades. "Mr. Sullivan?" The boots didn't move. A wrench clanged against something metallic. "I need help with a situation." "Shop rate's $90 an hour." The voice came out muffled, tired. "Cash up front." "It's about a dog." The boots went still. Then Jack Sullivan rolled out from under the truck on a creeper that squeaked like it needed oiling. Michael understood immediately why Tommy had suggested him. Same sharp jaw as the boy, same dark hair, though Sullivan's was going gray at the temples and needed barbering. Oil-stained hands that had once held an M16 steady in places most folks couldn't find on a map. "You're the fellow renting the Hendricks place." Not a question. Michael nodded. Jack stood, wiped his hands on a shop rag that made them dirtier. His left eye didn't track quite right with his other one. "Tommy sent you." "Smart boy." His daddy was smarter, till he wasn't. Jack tossed the rag onto a workbench cluttered with alternator parts and empty Coca-Cola bottles. "Dog still in that tree?" Michael's surprise must have shown plain on his face. "Tommy's been taking food from my icebox for 10 days. Boy thinks I don't notice. Jack pulled a Marlboro from his shirt pocket, didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers like worry beads. Federal land. I know. No, you don't. Jack's good eye fixed hard on Michael's face. You know the number. 50,000. You don't know Dale Hutchins sleeping in his Dodge behind the Safeway. You don't know his daughter Betty working 3 jobs to pay for community college instead of state. The garage refrigerator hummed like it was thinking about giving up. A crow called from somewhere out back. I'll cover any fines, Michael said. Your money doesn't make my chainsaw legal. Michael felt his coat pocket vibrate. Another call from his brother David in New York. Something about depositions. He ignored it. Jack walked to the back corner of the garage, stopped at a padlocked cabinet that looked older than both of them. Tommy stopped talking after we buried his daddy. 3 years now, not a single word. He writes notes. That's not talking. Jack spun the combination lock with practiced fingers. You know what Caleb's last words were? On the satellite phone from Helmand Province? Michael waited. Tell Tommy I'll bring him a dog when I get home. The cabinet door swung open with a creak. Inside, a Husqvarna chainsaw gleamed like it had never cut wood. That was Caleb's, Jack said. Never been used. Been saving it for something worth the consequences. He lifted it out, careful as a newborn, checked the chain tension with experienced fingers. There's one problem, Jack said, and Michael's stomach tightened. Judge Sterling's been watching that tree like a hawk watches chickens. Sterling wants that whole section turned into development land. Jack pulled out a folded survey map from under a stack of yellowed invoices. Motor oil had stained the corners brown like spilled coffee. See this line here? Michael leaned close. Jack's finger, the nail split from some old injury, traced a boundary that ran straight through the forest, invisible to the trees and creatures, but everything to men with lawyers. Federal land ends right here. Sterling's development company owns every acre to the east. Jack's bad eye twitched the way it did when a storm was coming. Been trying to get the protected status lifted for 5 years. Claims the old-growth trees are a fire hazard, danger to the community. What's that got to do with Barron? Everything. Jack refolded the map with the careful precision of a man who'd learned to pack light in the service. Dead dog on federal land, trapped by what he calls a hazard tree? That's ammunition for his next petition to Washington. He's probably got photographs already, been documenting everything. Michael's coat pocket buzzed again. He pulled out the telephone just long enough to see his assistant's message about Monday's board meeting. He put it away without reading the rest. So we go now, Michael said, before Sterling knows I'm involved. Jack laughed, short and bitter as black coffee. Sterling knew the second your Lincoln turned off Highway 20. Nothing happens in Cedar Falls without that man knowing. He's got more eyes and ears than a cornfield's got crows. The crow outside called again, as if agreeing. Tommy's been feeding that dog for 10 days, Michael said. I know. In freezing rain and wind. I know that too. His father promised him. I know what Caleb promised. Jack's knuckles went white around the chainsaw handle. I was 3 vehicles back in the convoy that day. Heard the explosion. Held Caleb's hand while the medics worked on him. Told him lies about how he'd be fine while we both knew different. The refrigerator's compressor kicked on with a shudder that shook the whole appliance. Jack grabbed a red gas can from the shelf, shook it to check the level. Sterling's got legal papers ready to file. The second anyone touches that tree, federal marshals show up faster than gossip at a church social. How do you know all this? His daughter Angela works at the courthouse. She's not like her father, thank the Lord. Jack unscrewed the gas cap on the chainsaw, poured, careful as a pharmacist measuring medicine. She called me last night, warning me what would happen if I tried to help. But you're still going to do it. Jack wiped spilled gasoline from the saw's housing with an old undershirt. Caleb would have. That boy had a hero complex wider than the Columbia River. Ran in the family like brown eyes and stubbornness. They loaded the chainsaw into Jack's pickup, a 1988 Ford that had more rust than paint but started on the first turn of the key. The bench seat springs groaned under Michael's weight. The cab smelled like cigarette smoke and WD-40 and 20 years of spilled coffee. Jack shifted into reverse, the transmission complaining. "You know what Tommy does every single morning?" Michael shook his head. "Sets his daddy's place at the breakfast table. Every morning for 3 years. Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, coffee cup turned handle out, just how Caleb liked it. Ruth tries to stop him, but the boy just does it anyway. Won't eat his own eggs and toast until that empty plate sits there for exactly 20 minutes. The truck lurched backward, gravel popping under the tires. Boy thinks if he keeps the routine perfect, if he never misses a morning, his daddy might walk through that door. They drove without talking down the dirt road. Michael watched the Douglas firs thicken on both sides, rising like cathedral pillars into morning fog. The forest here was older than the town, older than the state itself. These trees had been standing when his grandfather was born. There, Jack pointed through the windshield that needed cleaning. 3 vehicles sat parked near the federal landmarker. A Forest Service truck with government plates, a Cedar Falls police cruiser with a dent in the rear fender, and a black Lincoln Continental that could only belong to one person in the county. "Sterling," Jack muttered. He pulled over 50 yards short, turned off the engine that died with a small backfire. Through the trees, Michael could make out figures standing near Barron's tree. Tommy was there, kneeling by the trunk, his small hands flat against the bark. Ruth Walsh stood beside him, her white hair bright as fresh snow in the filtered sunlight. A uniformed officer, the name tape said Banks, held a clipboard. And a man in a gray suit, who had to be Judge Marcus Sterling, standing like he owned the air everyone was breathing. "They're waiting for us," Michael said. "No," Jack pointed to Tommy. "They're waiting for him to give up, to accept what can't be changed." Tommy was pressing something against the tree, both palms flat, his thin shoulders shaking like he was trying to hold the tree together by will alone. "Sterling probably told the boy Barron's already dead," Jack said. "Easier to sell his hazard tree story if there's no rescue to attempt." Michael's telephone rang, David's name on the screen. He almost answered, then saw Tommy stand up, saw Ruth try to pull him away from the tree, saw the boy resist with a fury that made all the adults step back. "We go around," Michael said. "Come in from the north side where they can't see." "That's a federal crime right there." "So is letting that boy lose the only thing he's got left of his father." Jack's good eye studied Michael's face like he was reading fine print. "You know there's no going back once we start cutting. Sterling will own you 6 ways from Sunday." Michael thought of his boardroom in New York, the leather chairs where men decided other men's futures based on spreadsheets and quarterly projections. The apartment overlooking Central Park where he ate dinner alone every night. The only sound, the clink of sterling silver on china. The charity foundation Sarah had begged him to start, the one he'd never gotten to because there was always one more deal to close. "I've been owned my whole life," Michael said. "Just didn't know it until now." Jack reached behind the seat, pulled out a second chainsaw, smaller and older, with teeth worn from use. "This one's mine. Louder than a freight train, but she'll cut true." They opened the truck doors quiet as they could. Michael could hear voices drifting through the trees. Sterling's voice, smooth as motor oil. "Unfortunate situation, but the law is perfectly clear." Ruth's voice, sharp as winter wind. "The law's wrong when it lets innocent creatures suffer." "Mrs. Walsh, emotional arguments don't change federal statutes." Michael and Jack moved through the underbrush, chainsaws heavy in their hands. Pine needles, thick as carpet, muffled their steps. The ground sloped up, then down into a shallow ravine that would bring them out behind Barron's tree. Michael's chest felt tight, not from the walking, but from something else. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you're about to jump, but not knowing how deep the water is below. They reached the ravine's edge. 20 feet away, Barron's tree rose massive and split, the dog invisible inside, but his presence radiating out through Tommy's desperate attention. through Ruth's rigid spine, through the way even Sterling kept glancing at the hollow like he expected something to emerge. Jack hefted his chainsaw. "Once I start cutting, we've got maybe 3 minutes before they reach us. 4 if Officer Banks decides to walk slow." "She will," a voice said soft behind them. Michael spun around. A young woman stood there, maybe 25, with Sterling's sharp features but eyes gentle as her father's were hard. She wore a simple dress and courthouse badge. Angela Sterling, clerk. "Daddy doesn't know I'm here," she said. "But Tommy's father saved my cousin Eddie in Kandahar, pulled him out of a burning Humvee when everyone else ran." She handed Jack a paper. "Temporary restraining order against the federal injunction. Judge Coleman signed it an hour ago. It's probably not worth the paper it's written on, but it'll confuse things long enough." Jack took the paper, looked at Michael. "Your call, Mr. Harrison." Michael could hear Barron breathing inside the tree, each exhale a whisper against the cold morning. Could see Tommy's hands still pressed against the bark, like he could hold the dog's life in place through pure love. His telephone lit up with another call from David. This time the message preview showed, "SEC investigation initiated. Don't do anything foolish." Michael looked at Angela Sterling. "Your father will ruin you for this." "Probably." She pulled her cardigan tighter. "But some things you can't live with not doing." A sound came from the tree. Not Barron. Tommy. A single word, muffled by bark and tears but clear as church bells. "Please." The first word he'd spoken in 3 years. And it wasn't even for himself. The chainsaw roared to life in Jack's hands like thunder breaking over still water. Every head at Barron's tree turned toward them. Judge Sterling's face went from pale to the color of pickled beets in the space of a heartbeat. "Stop!" Sterling's voice cracked like a teenager's. He fumbled for something in his coat pocket. "Patricia, arrest these men!" Officer Banks didn't move. Her hand rested on her duty belt, but nowhere near her handcuffs. "Sir, I need to verify which jurisdiction we're dealing with here." "It's federal land." Angela Sterling stepped out from behind Jack, holding the paper high above her head like a flag of truce. "Temporary restraining order, Daddy. Your injunction is stayed pending review." Sterling's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish pulled from water. "You're my daughter." "Yes." Angela's voice stayed steady, though Michael could see her hands trembling like aspen leaves. "And Caleb Walsh saved Eddie's life. Your nephew, remember?" Jack revved the chainsaw, walked toward the tree with the determination of a man who'd made harder choices in worse places. Michael followed, his own saw heavy as a sack of grain in his arms. Tommy scrambled back from the trunk, eyes wide as dinner plates. Ruth grabbed her grandson's shoulders, pulled him clear. The chain bit into bark with a sound like tearing burlap. Chips flew, white and yellow against the dark outer layer. The pitch changed as Jack found his rhythm, steady pressure, letting the saw do what it was made for. "This is illegal!" Sterling shouted over the noise. He turned to Officer Banks. "I'm ordering you." "You can't order me to do anything, Judge. You're retired." Banks pulled out her radio, spoke into it, but Michael couldn't make out the words over the chainsaw's scream. Jack cut a horizontal line 3 feet above where Barron was trapped. The tree was massive, thick as a wagon wheel at the cut line. This would take time they didn't have, Michael knew. He pulled the starter cord on his saw. Nothing. Again. The engine caught on the 3rd try, vibration running up his arms like electricity. He'd never used a chainsaw in his life. The chain skipped, bucked against the wood like an angry animal. Jack reached over without stopping his own cut, adjusted Michael's grip, showed him the angle with a tilt of his wrists. Better. The teeth caught, pulled themselves into the wood hungry as termites. They cut in parallel lines, Jack's experience showing in his smooth progress. Michael's line wavered like a child's first attempt at writing, but it cut. Sweat ran down his back despite the morning chill. His shoulders burned like he'd been carrying water buckets uphill. The gasoline fumes made his head swim. Through the noise and vibration, he heard Baron whimper inside the tree, a sound that cut through everything else. Tommy had crept forward again, was kneeling by a gap in the bark, his small hand reaching inside. Michael could see the boy's lips moving, talking, after 3 years of silence. The words lost in the saw's roar, but the meaning clear as spring water. Sterling paced behind them like a caged rooster, telephone pressed to his ear. "Yes, federal marshals, immediately. The location is—" His voice cut off sharp. Michael glanced back. Ruth Walsh had taken Sterling's telephone right out of his hand. She held it over a puddle of standing water from last night's rain, eyebrows raised like a school teacher with a note passed in class. "You wouldn't," Sterling said. Ruth opened her fingers. The telephone disappeared with a small plop. Angela covered her mouth, but Michael caught the smile underneath. The saws ground on, hungry and loud. Michael's cut was nearly through his section. Jack's went deeper, angled to control the fall. Sawdust covered everything, turned the air golden as honey in the morning light. Michael's arms shook like he had palsy. His lower back seized up, tight as a rusted hinge. "Switch!" Jack shouted. They traded positions, smooth as dancers. Jack's saw screamed through Michael's section, while Michael fought to maintain Jack's angle. The tree groaned, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, older than the town, older than memory. "Almost there," Jack yelled. "When I say everybody get back!" More vehicles arriving. Michael couldn't turn to look, but he heard doors slamming, voices shouting. Federal marshals, most likely. Sterling's reinforcements arriving like cavalry. The tree shifted. Just an inch, but Michael felt it through the saw, through his bones. "Tommy, get back!" Ruth shouted, her voice high and frightened. But Tommy didn't move. His arm was deep inside the hollow now, and Michael realized with cold certainty that the boy was holding Baron, keeping the dog from trying to escape as the tree moved, keeping him from being crushed if the trunk twisted wrong. "Kid won't leave him," Jack muttered through clenched teeth, never stopping his cut. Just like his daddy. Brave to the point of foolish. The final section of holding wood started to splinter. Crack lines spread from their cuts like lightning frozen in wood. The tree wanted to fall. 300 years of growth about to end in 3 minutes of cutting. "Now!" Jack killed his saw, grabbed Tommy around the waist. The boy fought him with animal desperation, fingernails raking Jack's arms, drawing blood. But Jack hauled him back as the massive trunk tilted, seemed to pause like it was reconsidering, then fell with a sound like the world breaking in half. The ground shook hard enough to knock Michael to his knees. Dust and bark and needles filled the air thick as fog. The impact rattled his teeth, sent shock waves through the earth that he felt in his chest. When the dust cleared enough to see, Baron's prison had been opened. The hollow was exposed like a wound, the dog visible but not moving. Blood on his fur, dark and wet. Eyes closed, still as death. Tommy broke free from Jack, scrambled to the dog on hands and knees, put his ear to Baron's chest, listening with his whole body. "Is he?" Michael started to ask. Tommy looked up, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face. And for one terrible moment, Michael thought they'd been too late after all. Then Baron's tail moved. Just once. A single thump against the ground, weak as a newborn's grip. "He's breathing," Tommy whispered, voice raw and unused, like a gate that hadn't opened in years. "But something's wrong. He's not." The boy's hand came away from Baron's side, red with fresh blood. "Mr. Harrison?" That's when Michael saw them. 3 federal marshals, hands resting on their weapons, spreading out to surround them like wolves around wounded deer. Nobody moves. The lead marshal's hand rested on his holstered pistol. Badge read Hernandez. Deep acne scars marked both cheeks like old smallpox. "Weapons down. Now." Michael let the chainsaw drop. The engine coughed once and died. Jack set his down slower, eyes never leaving the marshals' faces. Barron's breathing came in short gasps like a pump handle working dry. Blood pooled under his right side, soaking into the pine needles dark as spilled molasses. Tommy pressed both hands against the wound, but the blood seeped between his small fingers, steady as a leaking faucet. "We need a veterinarian," Michael said. "You need a lawyer." Hernandez stepped forward, handcuffs catching the morning light. "Michael Harrison, you're under arrest for violation of federal statute." "The dog's dying." Tommy's voice cracked like green wood in a fire. "Please." Dr. Ellen Crawford pushed through the gathering crowd of townspeople. Michael hadn't seen her arrive. She carried a medical bag worn smooth from use, dropped to her knees beside Barron without asking anybody's permission. "Move your hands, Tommy. Let me see." The boy pulled back, reluctant as letting go of a rope in deep water. Crawford's fingers probed the wound. Barron whimpered, tried to lift his head an inch off the ground. "Puncture wound from the falling wood. Probably caught a splinter when the tree came down." She pulled out gauze from her bag, pressed it against the bleeding. "He needs surgery. Right now." "Nobody's going anywhere," Hernandez said, flat as day-old coffee. Crawford looked up at him with eyes that had seen too many animals die for stupid reasons. "This animal will be dead in 20 minutes without proper intervention." "Not my problem, ma'am." "It's mine." Officer Banks stepped between Hernandez and the group, planting herself solid as a fence post. "This is still my jurisdiction until you show me a federal warrant." Hernandez pulled out his telephone. "Judge Sterling called. A retired judge has no authority to summon federal intervention." Banks kept her voice level as a carpenter's bubble. "Show me a warrant or step back." More vehicles arriving, truck doors slamming like gunshots. Pickup trucks mostly, parking wherever they fit along the dirt road. Cedar Falls folks climbing out, faces Michael recognized from the grocery store, the gas station, the diner where he sometimes ate breakfast alone. People who'd never spoken to him beyond morning and thank you, now standing witness. Pastor Frank Morrison pushed through, his collar white as fresh milk against his black shirt. "What's happening here?" "Federal crime," Sterling said. He'd found Angela's restraining order in the dirt, was tearing it into pieces small as confetti. "Destruction of protected resources." Morrison looked at the fallen tree, at Barron bleeding out, at Tommy covered in blood and tears. "I see a community trying to save one of God's creatures. The law. Romans 13 says respect authority." Morrison cut him off, smooth as a sharp knife through soft butter. "But James 4:17 says, if you know the right thing to do and don't do it, that's sin." Sterling's face darkened like a storm cloud. "Don't quote scripture at me, Pastor." "Then I'll quote common sense. You want to arrest people for saving a dog?" The crowd had grown to 30, maybe 40 people. Jim Bradley was there, the contractor who'd refused to help earlier, standing with his arms crossed. Mrs. Chen from the diner, still wearing her apron. Tom Peterson, who ran the hardware store, holding his telephone up, recording everything. Crawford worked on Barron, her movements quick and sure as a pianist's. "I need to transport him. The puncture's deep. Might have caught the liver." "I said nobody moves," Hernandez repeated, but his voice had less steel in it now. Jack stood slowly, deliberate as a cat. Michael saw his hands curl into fists, saw the way his weight shifted forward onto the balls of his feet. The kind of stance a man takes before a fight he knows is coming. "Jack," Michael warned. Ruth Walsh moved between Jack and the marshal, quick as thought. "Young man," she said to Hernandez, steel in her voice that could cut glass. "I taught 5th grade for 37 years. I know a bully when I see one." "Man, step back." "I will not." Ruth's voice could have frozen July. "That dog kept my grandson from disappearing entirely into grief after his father died. You want to let Barron die to prove some point about federal authority?" The crowd pressed closer. Not threatening exactly, just present. bearing witness the way folks do at accidents and funerals. Angela Sterling walked to her father. "Daddy, stop this."
"You betrayed me.
"I chose what was right over what was legal."
You chose sentiment over law."
"Caleb Walsh saved Eddie," Angela said, each word clear as a bell. "Your sister's son. Caleb ran through machine gun fire to pull him out of that burning vehicle. Eddie's alive, has 3 children now because of Tommy's father. And you're going to stand there and let Tommy watch his dog die?" Sterling's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Barron convulsed, his whole body going rigid.
Crawford swore under her breath.
"He's going into shock. We're running out of time." Michael made a decision. He walked to his Lincoln, popped the trunk, pulled out the emergency first aid kit. Pathetically small for the task, but it had instant cold packs. He brought them to Crawford. "Against the wound," she said. "Might slow the bleeding." Hernandez stepped forward. "Sir, I told you not to move." Michael turned to face him. "So shoot me." The words hung in the morning air like smoke. The marshal's hand twitched toward his weapon, stopped. "That's what it'll take," Michael continued. "You'll have to shoot me, in front of 40 witnesses with cameras, because I'm going to help save this dog." He knelt beside Barron, helped Crawford apply pressure to the wound. The dog's eyes had rolled back, showing white like boiled eggs. His breathing was barely visible, chest moving shallow as a sleeping baby's. Tommy crawled to Barron's head, lifted it gentle into his lap. "Don't go," he whispered, voice breaking like his heart. "Please don't go. I already lost." His voice failed entirely. Jack knelt on Barron's other side, then Ruth, then Pastor Morrison. One by one, the townspeople formed a circle around the dying dog. Jim Bradley, looking ashamed of his earlier refusal. Mrs. Chen, tears running down her weathered cheeks. Tom Peterson, still recording but silent now. Even Officer Banks stepped into the circle. Hernandez and his 2 partners stood outside, weapons still holstered but hands ready. "This is obstruction of justice. This is Cedar Falls," Jim Bradley said, finding his voice. "We take care of our own." Sterling pushed through the circle, looked down at his daughter. "If you don't move, I'll make sure you never work in law again." Angela met his eyes, steady as a lighthouse beam. "Okay." That single word seemed to break something in Sterling. His shoulders sagged like a scarecrow losing its stuffing. Crawford looked up from Barron, face grim as a funeral director's. "I need to move him now, or he dies. No other options." "The veterinary clinic is 15 minutes, Michael said. "He doesn't have 15 minutes. Crawford's hands were red as autumn leaves with Barron's blood. 10 at most. Michael's mind raced through the arithmetic of death. 15 minutes to the clinic. Barron had 10. The math didn't work. "My truck's closer," Jack said, "parked just up the access road." "How far?" 3 minutes if we carry him careful." Crawford shook her head. "Can't run carrying him. Too much jostling could tear the wound wider." The crowd stood frozen, everyone understanding the impossible equation. That's when Michael heard it. Faint at first, then growing, the sound of rotor blades cutting through air. Sterling smiled cold as February. "Federal backup. This is over." But the helicopter that appeared over the tree line wasn't federal green. It was white, with a red cross painted on the side. Life Flight. Officer Banks held up her radio. "I called them 10 minutes ago, said we had an animal emergency." "They don't transport animals," Sterling said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. The helicopter circled, looking for a place to set down. The fallen tree had created just enough of a clearing. A voice crackled over Banks's radio. "Cedar Falls ground, this is Life Flight 7. We understand you have a young boy in psychological crisis who needs his therapy animal transported?" Banks keyed her radio, glanced at Tommy, then spoke clear. "That's correct. Boy is showing signs of severe emotional trauma. He and his service animal both need immediate transport." "Service animal?" Hernandez started forward. "That's fraud." Pastor Morrison stepped in his path, solid as an oak door. Tommy has selective mutism from trauma. Barron helps him communicate. That's a service animal in my book, and I'll swear to it in court if needed. And mine, said a new voice. Everyone turned. A woman in her 70s stood at the edge of the crowd, still in her house slippers and quilted robe. Gray hair uncombed, but eyes sharp as tacks. Judge Dorothy Coleman, whose name was on Angela's restraining order. Judge Coleman, Sterling stammered. You're out of your jurisdiction. I'm walking my property line, Marcus. She pointed to a barely visible survey stake driven into the ground years ago. My land starts right there. That dog is 3 feet onto my property. Would you like to argue jurisdiction with me? The helicopter descended, wind from its rotors sending pine needles flying like snow. The pilot set it down in the small clearing with barely 10 feet to spare on each side. 2 paramedics jumped out with a stretcher. Where's the patient? The lead medic asked, then saw Barron. His face changed. Crawford pointed to Barron without hesitation. Puncture wound, possible liver involvement, severe blood loss. The medic looked at his partner, then at the crowd, then at the cameras recording everything. The call was accurate, Judge Coleman said, voice carrying the authority of 40 years on the bench. The boy and his service animal both need transport. Unless you'd like to explain to the news crews already heading here why you let them both die over paperwork. The medics moved. They lifted Barron onto the stretcher, gentle as handling eggs. Tommy climbed in beside him, still gripping the dog's fur like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. I'm the veterinarian, Crawford said. I need to ride along. And I'm paying, Michael added, pulling out his wallet. Whatever it costs. Sterling made one last attempt. This is conspiracy to defraud. Marcus, Judge Coleman said quietly. Your nephew Eddie is watching this on his telephone right now. Your sister just called me. She said to tell you that if you stop this rescue, you're not welcome at Thanksgiving dinner, or Christmas, or Easter, ever again. Sterling's backup telephone, he always carried 2, buzzed with a message. He looked at it, and his face went gray as old dishwater. Angela leaned over, saw the screen. A photograph of a young Marine in a hospital bed, giving a thumbs up. Eddie. The caption read, Let the dog live, Uncle Marcus. The helicopter blades began to spin faster. Crawford and Tommy were already inside with Barron. Room for one more, the pilot called over the noise. Michael started forward, but Jack caught his arm. Let me go. I was with Caleb when he died. Tommy might need someone who was there. Michael nodded. Jack jogged to the helicopter, climbed in. The door slid shut with finality. As the helicopter lifted off, Tommy's face appeared in the window. He was saying something, lips moving carefully so anyone could read them. Thank you. The helicopter banked north toward Portland, toward surgeons and hope and possibility. Hernandez looked at his partners, then at the crowd, then at the cameras still recording everything. Judge Coleman, does your property line really start there? No idea, she said, mild as milk. But would you like to spend 6 months in court proving it while this story spreads across the whole country? The marshal holstered his weapon with the resignation of a man who knows when he's beat. We'll need statements from everyone. Monday, Officer Banks said. My office, 9 in the morning. Sterling stood alone now, even his daughter having moved away. He watched the helicopter disappear over the ridge like it was carrying away everything he'd worked for. This isn't over, he said to nobody in particular. No, Michael said, suddenly tired as he'd ever been. It's just beginning. Because Sterling's telephone was ringing, and Michael could see the caller identification from 10 feet away. Federal prosecutor. The real authority had arrived. Sterling's telephone kept ringing. He stared at it like a man looking at a telegram in wartime, then answered on the 7th ring. Yes, sir. His voice had lost its courtroom brass. I understand. No, sir. The situation, A pause. His face went paler with each word he heard. "Yes, sir. Immediately." He hung up, looked at Hernandez. "Federal prosecutor wants you back in Portland. Now." "What about the arrests?" Changed his mind. Sterling's words came out bitter as quinine. Seems someone sent him video of a decorated veteran's son trying to save his service dog, while federal agents stood around with their hands on their guns. Hernandez's scarred face flushed red as a beet. "We were following protocol." "Protocol doesn't matter when it's trending on the internet," Officer Banks said. She held up her telephone. 200,000 people have already seen it. "My niece in California just called asking if that's really our town." The crowd hadn't dispersed. If anything, it had grown larger. Michael saw telephones everywhere, all recording, all sharing. The modern version of the town square gossip chain, except now the whole world could listen in. Mrs. Chen approached Michael with a thermos, the same one she used at the diner. "Coffee. You look about ready to fall over." He took it, hands shaking slightly. The adrenaline was leaving him weak as dishwater. "Thank you." "My husband had a German Shepherd when we first came to America," she said, her accent thicker when she was emotional. "Best dog that ever lived. Died saving our daughter from a rattlesnake in '92. She squeezed his shoulder with a hand strong from 40 years of carrying plates. "You did right." Hernandez and his partners walked to their vehicles, the crowd parting but watching. One of the younger marshals muttered something about local interference. Jim Bradley heard him. "Son, you ever serve?" The marshal stopped. "No." "Then you don't understand. That boy's father died wearing the uniform. In this town, we don't abandon the families of men who died for this country. Not ever." The federal vehicles pulled away, leaving Sterling standing alone in the clearing like a scarecrow someone forgot to take down. Angela hadn't gone to him. She stood with Judge Coleman, both women watching him with expressions Michael couldn't read. Sterling's telephone rang again. This time he walked away to answer it, shoulders hunched like a man walking against a hard wind. Michael's own telephone had been buzzing nonstop. 17 missed calls from David. 43 from various board members. 22 from reporters who'd somehow gotten his private number. He turned it off without listening to any messages. "Mr. Harrison." Ruth Walsh stood beside him, Tommy's notebook in her weathered hands. "Tommy wanted you to have this." Michael opened it. Pages and pages of notes about Barron. Feeding times written in careful print. Behavior observations. Pencil drawings of the dog, crude but full of love. And on the last page, written in shaky letters like the boy was learning to write all over again, "Thank you for hearing me when I couldn't speak." "He found his voice because of you," Ruth said. "No, he found it because Barron needed him to." "Same thing, isn't it?" She studied his face with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "You have children?" "No. My wife and I, we kept putting it off. Always one more deal to close first. Then she got sick." Ruth nodded like she understood everything in those few words. "Tommy's all I have left. After Caleb died, I thought I'd lost Tommy too. 3 years of silence. Do you know what that's like? Watching a child disappear inside himself, inch by inch, until you're not sure there's anybody left in there?" Michael thought of his own disappearance. Into work, into numbers, into the safety of contracts and acquisitions where everything had a value and nothing really mattered. "I have some idea," he said. Pastor Morrison approached, his round face grave as a pallbearer's. "Just got word from Ellen Crawford. They made it to Portland. Barron's in surgery." "Will he make it?" "She doesn't know. The puncture was deep. Caught something called the portal vein along with the liver." Michael knew enough from Sarah's illness to understand that was bad. The portal vein carried blood from the digestive organs. If it was damaged... "How's Tommy?" "Jack's with him. Ellen says the boy won't leave the waiting room. Just sits there staring at the door." A van pulled up, antenna dish on top like a metal mushroom. Portland news station. The door slid open and a news crew piled out like circus performers. Then another van. Then a third. "Here we go," Officer Banks muttered. The reporters emerged with their perfect hair and practiced smiles. The lead reporter, a blonde woman in a red suit that looked ridiculous in the forest, went straight for Sterling. "Judge Sterling, is it true you tried to prevent the rescue of a service dog?" Sterling straightened his tie, a gesture Michael recognized as buying time. "No comment." "The video shows you arguing against—" "I said no comment." The reporter turned, scanning the crowd like a hawk looking for mice. Her eyes landed on Michael. "You're Michael Harrison, the billionaire. You cut down the tree?" Michael felt the cameras swing toward him like cannons. The red lights blinked on. The hunger for a story was palpable as heat from a stove. "Mr. Harrison, why would someone of your standing risk federal charges for a dog?" He thought of all the media training he'd had over the years, the careful statements, the measured responses, the way to control a narrative like steering a boat. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said. "But the law was going to let an innocent animal die. Sometimes the law is wrong." The reporter's eyes lit up like she'd struck gold. "Are you saying people should break laws they disagree with?" "I'm saying people should think for themselves, not let others do their thinking for them." "Mr. Harrison," another reporter pushed forward, a young man with slicked hair and eager eyes. "Is it true you're under SEC investigation for insider trading?" The question hit Michael like cold water in the face. How did they know? He'd only found out this morning from David's messages. "That's not related to, but it speaks to your character, doesn't it? A billionaire who thinks he's above the law?" The crowd shifted, uncertain now. Michael felt the narrative changing, the way it always did when money entered the picture. People who'd been sympathetic suddenly wondering if they'd been fooled. Sterling seized the moment like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. "Mr. Harrison represents exactly what's wrong with this country. Rich men thinking they can buy their way out of consequences." "I haven't bought anything," Michael said. "You hired the helicopter to save a life. You bribed officials. I offered to pay fines." "Same thing." Judge Coleman stepped forward. "Marcus, stop this." But Sterling was building momentum, finding his courtroom rhythm like a preacher finding his cadence. This man disrupted a federal investigation, destroyed protected resources, and corrupted local law enforcement, all because he thought his money made him special. The cameras captured every word. Michael felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not quite pain, not yet, but pressure, like a hand squeezing. "You know what I think?" Sterling continued. "I think Mr. Harrison saw an opportunity for good publicity. Billionaire saves dog. Great headline to distract from his SEC problems." "You son of a—" Jack's voice cut through everything. Everyone turned. Jack stood by his truck, having just returned from the helicopter landing zone. His shirt was soaked with Barron's blood, dark and stiff as old paint. "Tommy asked me to come back, to make sure Mr. Harrison was okay." Jack walked toward Sterling, each step deliberate as a funeral march. That boy, who just found his voice after 3 years, was worried about the man who helped save his dog. "Mr. Sullivan, you're emotionally involved." "You're right, I am." Jack stopped 3 feet from Sterling. "I watched 19-year-old kids die in Afghan dirt. Watched them bleed out calling for their mothers. You know what they never called for? Their investment portfolios." The cameras caught every word. This man, Jack pointed at Michael, risked everything for a dog he'd never seen before, for a boy he'd just met, while you sat behind your desk calculating political advantage. Sterling's telephone rang again. He looked at the screen, and his face went white as fresh paper. "Who is it?" Angela asked. Sterling didn't answer, but Michael could see the caller identification reflected in his glasses. Senate Ethics Committee. The judges Sterling had been lobbying, the federal positions he'd been angling for, all watching this unfold on live television. "Dad?" Angela reached for him. Sterling turned and walked to his Lincoln Continental, movements mechanical as a wind-up toy. Started the engine. Drove away without looking back at anyone. The reporters immediately swarmed Michael and Jack, questions flying like hornets, microphones pushed forward. Through the chaos, Michael's telephone buzzed with a text from Ellen Crawford. He looked at the screen and felt his knees go weak. Barron's heart stopped on the table. Michael's vision narrowed to the telephone screen. The words blurred, came back sharp. Barron's heart stopped on the table. "Mr. Harrison, how do you respond to allegations?" The reporter's voice faded to nothing. Michael pushed through the microphones, walking toward his car on legs that felt like water. His chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. Jack caught his arm. "What is it?" Michael showed him the telephone. Jack's face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. "We need to get to Portland," Jack said. "That's 2 hours. Then we drive fast." They headed for Jack's truck. The reporters followed, shouting questions like seagulls after bread. Officer Banks stepped between them, hands up. "Folks, give them space. Medical emergency." Jack's truck started on the first try. Michael buckled in as Jack threw it in reverse, gravel spraying like buckshot. The speedometer hit 60 before they reached the main road. Michael's telephone buzzed. Another text from Crawford. "Got him back, but barely. Tommy won't leave the OR door." "The boy knows?" Jack asked. "Seems like it." Jack pushed the old Ford to 75 on the 2-lane road. The engine screamed like it might fly apart. "Caleb died on a table like that, in Kandahar. The medics got his heart going twice before." He stopped, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Tommy doesn't need to see that again." Michael's chest tightened another notch. Not pain exactly. Pressure, like breathing through wet wool. "You okay?" Jack glanced over. "Fine." Another text from Crawford. "Second cardiac event. They're working on him." Michael typed back with fingers that didn't want to cooperate. "How's Tommy?" Silent again, just standing at the door. The pressure in Michael's chest spread down his left arm. He recognized this feeling, had it once before, 5 years ago, the night Sarah died. The night he'd tried to follow her with pills and bourbon before David found him. "Pull over," he said. "What?" "Pull over. Now." Jack swerved onto the shoulder. Michael opened the door, stumbled out, vomited into the weeds. His shirt was soaked with sweat. Heart hammering rhythms that didn't match, like a drummer who'd lost the beat. Jack came around the truck. "You're having a heart attack." "No. Anxiety. Had them before." "That's not anxiety. I've seen anxiety. This is drive." Michael wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, climbed back in. "Tommy needs someone there." "You need a hospital." "Then it's convenient we're heading to one." Jack stared at him for 3 seconds, then got back in the driver's seat. "If you die in my truck, I'm dumping your body on Sterling's lawn." They drove in silence for 10 miles. Michael focused on breathing, in through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. The pressure eased slightly but didn't leave. It sat there like a stone in his chest. His telephone rang, David calling from New York. "Don't answer that," Jack said. Michael answered anyway. "David." "Michael, what in God's name are you doing? The SEC is—" "David, I need you to do something." "Are you listening? The board called an emergency meeting. They're going to remove you as CEO." "Good." Silence. Then, "What?" I said, "Good, let them." "Michael, you built that company. It's everything you—" "It's nothing. It's spreadsheets and empty offices and people I fire to make quarterly projections look better." "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clear for the first time in 5 years." Michael's chest squeezed again. He pressed his fist against it. "David, I need you to call Portland General. There's a boy named Tommy Walsh in their veterinary surgical waiting room." "Veterinary?" "Long story. He's 11. His dog is dying on the table. He has no parents. Grandmother named Ruth, but she's back in Cedar Falls." "What do you want me to—" "Make sure he's not alone. Please." David's voice changed. "Are you all right? You sound—"
Just do this for me. For once in your life, do something that actually matters."
Michael hung up. They were entering Portland's suburbs now. Strip malls and chain restaurants blurring past like a movie on fast forward. Crawford texted, "Third arrest. They're discussing stopping efforts." Michael typed, "How much to keep going?" "It's not about money. The damage might be too severe. How much would it cost to try everything?" A pause. "Then, maybe 50,000 for extraordinary measures. But the ethics?" Michael pulled up his banking application, transferred 60,000 to the veterinary hospital's account, typed, "Try everything." Jack took the exit for Portland General, tires squealing. "You know, throwing money at things doesn't always work." "I know, but not throwing it definitely doesn't work." The hospital loomed ahead like a concrete mountain. 7 stories of glass and steel and hope and despair. Jack pulled into emergency, but Michael pointed to the veterinary surgery entrance around the side. "You need the human emergency room," Jack said. "After." They parked. Michael's legs felt like rubber. He leaned on Jack, walking in. The receptionist looked up, alarm spreading across her face. "Sir, are you—" "Tommy Walsh. Where is he?" She pointed down the hall with a shaking finger. "Surgical waiting." "But, sir, you look—" Michael kept walking. The fluorescent lights stabbed at his eyes like needles. The antiseptic smell made his stomach roll again. 20 yards felt like 20 miles. 10 yards. 5. Tommy stood facing a door marked Surgery 3, authorized personnel only. Still as a statue. Dried blood on his flannel shirt turned brown as old rust. A man in an expensive suit sat in a chair nearby. David, somehow here already despite being in New York 2 hours ago. "Chartered a company jet," David said, standing. "You sounded wrong." Tommy didn't acknowledge them, just stared at the door like he could see through it if he looked hard enough. Michael lowered himself to the floor. The cool tile felt good against his palms. "Tommy?" The boy didn't turn. "He's fighting. Baron's fighting." Tommy's shoulders started to shake. No sound, just shaking like a leaf in wind. The surgery door opened. Dr. Crawford emerged, mask around her neck, scrubs soaked with sweat and blood. Her face told the story before her words could. "We got him back 3 times. But the damage to the portal vein, the blood loss..." She looked at Tommy. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We did everything possible." Tommy's knees buckled. Jack caught him before he hit the floor. "No," the boy whispered, voice raw as a wound. "No, he can't. He can't leave too." Michael tried to stand. The room tilted like a boat in a storm. His chest exploded with pain. Real, this time. Not anxiety, not pressure, but the feeling of his heart tearing itself apart like paper. He heard David shouting for help, heard Tommy screaming Baron's name, heard Jack cursing, felt the cold tile against his cheek. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was through the surgery door, still cracked open. Movement. A tail, thumping once against steel. But that was impossible. Crawford had just said. Michael's eyes opened to white ceiling tiles with water stains shaped like continents. A machine beeped somewhere to his left, steady as a metronome. His chest felt like someone had reached inside and rearranged everything with rough hands. "Don't move." David's face appeared above him. Dark circles under his eyes made him look 10 years older. "You've been out for 14 hours. Michael tried to speak. His throat felt lined with sandpaper. David held a cup with a straw to his lips. Small sips. The water burned going down. Michael managed. "Tommy?" "He's okay. Actually, you need to see this." David pulled out his telephone, showed Michael a video. Tommy sat on a hospital floor, Baron's head in his lap. The dog's side was wrapped in white bandages, an IV line running to his front leg, but his eyes were open, alert. His tail gave weak thumps against the linoleum as Tommy read to him from a book. "But Crawford said—" Michael's voice cracked. "There were 2 German shepherds in surgery yesterday. Baron and a police dog that got hit by a car chasing a suspect. Crawford was talking about the other one. By the time she realized the confusion, you were already coding." Michael stared at the screen. Baron was alive, broken but breathing. "The cardiac surgeon says you're lucky," David continued. 90% blockage in the LAD. They call that kind of heart attack the widowmaker. They put in 2 stents. You'll be here at least 3 more days. I need to see. You need to lie still before you blow another artery. David set down the telephone. Michael, we need to talk about what you said. About the company meaning nothing. It doesn't. You spent 30 years building it. 30 years building a monument to myself. Sarah tried to tell me. Remember what she said at the end? David looked away. They both remembered. Sarah, hollow-eyed from chemo, saying, "All that money, Michael, and you never bought anything that mattered." A knock at the door. Officer Banks entered, not in uniform. Jeans and a Cedar Falls High School sweatshirt that had been washed too many times. "Mr. Harrison, glad you're awake. I have some information you need to hear." She pulled a plastic chair close to the bed, its legs scraping against the floor. "The FBI opened an investigation into Judge Sterling, not because of the dog incident, because of what they found when they investigated you." "What?" "Your supposed insider trading? Sterling orchestrated it. He's been running a development scheme for 3 years. Buy land cheap near federal forests, then get the protected status removed through his connections in Washington. He needed someone with deep pockets to blame when it went south." Michael's monitor beeped faster. David reached for the nurse call button, but Michael waved him off. "Sterling planted evidence?" Michael asked. "Emails, financial transfers, all routed through servers he controlled." Banks pulled out a folder thick with papers. "But here's the interesting part. The FBI found something else while investigating. You've been anonymously donating to veterans' families for 5 years. $500 million. David's head snapped up like someone had yanked a string. "What?" "Through shell companies," Banks continued. "The Walsh family got $40,000 after Caleb died. They never knew where it came from. Monthly deposits that looked like military insurance." Michael closed his eyes. It was supposed to stay anonymous. "Why?" David asked. "Why hide it?" "Because Sarah started it. Before she died. Said we had to balance the books somehow. For everyone we'd stepped on climbing up." Banks stood, the chair scraping again. "Sterling's been arrested. Federal fraud charges, money laundering, conspiracy. His development company's being investigated for environmental violations going back a decade." She moved toward the door, stopped. "Angela Sterling asked me to tell you she's sorry for what her father did. She's taking care of the legal fees for everyone involved." After Banks left, David sat in silence. Michael could hear carts rolling in the hallway, someone's television playing a game show, life continuing outside this room. $500 million, David finally said, "and you never said anything." "What was there to say? You let everyone think you were Gordon Gekko while secretly, I am Gordon Gekko. A few donations don't change that. I destroyed people's lives for profit margins." "Michael." The door opened. Ruth Walsh wheeled Tommy in. The boy's face was pale but focused. He held a tablet computer, typed something, held it up. "Thank you for saving Baron." "I didn't save him. Dr. Crawford did." Tommy typed. "You started it. That matters." Ruth's eyes were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. "Officer Banks told us. About the donations? About Caleb's death benefit that we thought came from the Marines?" "That was supposed to be anonymous. I know." Ruth squeezed his hand with fingers strong from years of kneading bread and wringing wash. "But Tommy wanted you to know something." Tommy typed for a long time, then showed the screen. "Dad's last letter said he was scared I'd grow up thinking heroes only exist in war. He was wrong. Sometimes they're billionaires who ruin their lives for a dog they just met. Baron's alive because you decided his life mattered more than your freedom. That's what Dad would have done. Michael's eyes burned. The cardiac monitor started beeping irregularly. A nurse rushed in, young, with a name tag that said Brittany. Everyone out, his heart rate's all over the place. Wait, Michael said. Tommy, Baron needs to stay with you. Whatever it costs for special care, home equipment, anything. Tommy typed quickly. He's not staying with me. Michael's chest tightened again, but not from his heart. Tommy continued typing. He's staying with us. You're going to need him when you get out. Dogs are good for heart patients. I looked it up. Ruth smiled, the first real smile Michael had seen from her. We've already talked to your doctors. You'll be staying at our house for recovery. It's not negotiable. I have a penthouse in Portland. With no one in it, Ruth said firmly. You need watching. Tommy needs Baron. Baron needs both of you. It's decided. David laughed. Actually laughed. You know she's right. Michael looked at Tommy. Your dad would be proud of who you've become. Tommy's fingers hesitated over the tablet. Then, he'd be proud of both of us. The nurse moved between them, checking monitors. Out. Now. He needs rest. As Ruth wheeled Tommy away, the boy typed one more thing, held it up. Baron wants to meet you properly when you're better. They left. David stayed. You're really going to stay with them? David asked. In Cedar Falls? Seems like it. What about New York, the company? You want it? David blinked. I'm a lawyer, not a CEO. Then sell it, or let the board have it. I don't care anymore. Michael, I'm tired, David. Not sleepy tired, soul tired. I've been running since Sarah died, and I want to stop. David reached into his briefcase, leather creaking. There's one more thing. The FBI found this in Sterling's files. He handed Michael a photograph. Old, faded around the edges. A young boy, maybe 8, standing next to a German shepherd. The boy looked exactly like Tommy at that age, but it wasn't Tommy. Michael turns the photo over. On the back, in Sterling's precise handwriting, Marcus, age 8, with Rex. Dog died saving me from drowning in Crater Lake. Never told anyone. Too ashamed I needed saving. Sterling had a German shepherd named Rex who saved his life, David said. And he was going to let Baron die anyway. Michael stared at the photograph. Understanding flooded through him cold as creek water. He wasn't fighting the rescue because of the law, Michael said. He was fighting himself, the part that remembered being saved. 6 months later, Michael's fingers found the familiar grooves in Baron's collar as they walked the trail. The dog's breathing came steady now, no longer the desperate gasps from that October morning. The surgical scar along Baron's ribs had faded to a thin white line, barely visible through the fur that had grown back, thick and glossy. Slower, Tommy said, his voice still careful, like he was placing each word down gentle as eggs. Doctor said 20 minutes maximum. Michael's own scar pulled when he laughed. The incision from the cardiac surgery, a vertical line down his chest that Tommy called his zipper. Crawford said 20 minutes for Baron, not me. Both of you. Tommy adjusted the backpack carrying Baron's water and medication. The boy had grown 2 inches since October, his father's flannel shirt fitting better now. Stubborn old men, she said. They reached the clearing. The Douglas fir's stump rose 4 feet from the ground, the cut surface weathered gray from winter rain and spring sun. Someone had carved numbers into the wood. 10-07-25. The date, everything changed. Baron sniffed around the stump, tail wagging. His nose found the spot where Tommy used to leave food. The dog looked back at them, confused. Nothing there anymore, boy, Tommy said. He pulled a tennis ball from his pocket, yellow and new. But we've got better things now. He threw it. Not far. Baron couldn't run distances yet. Crawford said maybe never. The dog trotted after it,
brought it back, dropped it at Michael's feet with the pride of a job well done. Michael's telephone buzzed in his pocket. Text from David. Board wants to know if you'll consult on the Veterans Housing Project. He deleted it without responding.
Your brother again? Tommy asked. He's still trying to pull me back in. Will you go? Michael threw the ball again, watched Barron's determined trot. Would you? Tommy considered this, face serious as a judge. Dad used to say you can't drive forward while looking in the rearview mirror. Smart man. Jack says the same thing, at the shop yesterday. Michael had been teaching Tommy basic mechanics at Jack's garage every Tuesday and Thursday. Nothing complex. Oil changes, tire rotation, spark plug replacement. Things a boy should know. Things Michael had never learned because there'd been no one to teach him. Just libraries and stolen moments watching mechanics work. Barron returned with the ball, panting lightly. Michael poured water from the thermos into the collapsible bowl they carried everywhere now. The dog drank messily, water dripping from his muzzle onto Michael's shoes. A figure emerged from the trail, Angela Sterling, carrying a clipboard and wearing mud-caked hiking boots. She'd taken a job with the Forest Service after her father's conviction. Minimum wage, maximum satisfaction, she'd told Michael at the sentencing. Mr. Harrison, Tommy. She nodded at them, then knelt to let Barron sniff her hand. Monthly Forest Service inspection. She'd been doing these inspections regular as clockwork, though Michael suspected it had more to do with checking on them than checking on the forest. How is he? Michael asked. They both knew who he meant. Serving his 18 months. Model prisoner, apparently. She scratched behind Barron's ears in the spot that made his back leg twitch. He asked me to give you something. She pulled an envelope from her jacket. Michael's name and Sterling's precise handwriting. You don't have to read it, she said. Michael opened it anyway. A single paragraph. I spent 40 years believing strength meant never needing rescue. The photograph David showed you, Rex saving me, I buried that weakness so deep I forgot it was actually my greatest moment of grace. You remembered. That's the difference between us. My shame versus your humanity. The dog lived because you're the man I never let myself become. No signature. No need. Angela stood, brushing dirt from her knees. The veterinary clinic's dedication is next week. You coming? The new clinic, built with Michael's money but bearing Crawford's name. She'd insisted on that, said her name on it meant more to the community than his money behind it. We'll be there, Tommy answered for them. After Angela left, they sat on a fallen log that had been there so long it had moss growing on it thick as carpet. Barron settled between them, head on Michael's knee, eyes half closed in contentment. Grandma wants to know about Thanksgiving, Tommy said. What about it? You're supposed to invite David. Ruth wants my brother at her table? She says you need family. Tommy scratched behind Barron's ears. Both kinds. Blood and chosen. Michael felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but Crawford had taught him to recognize the difference between cardiac events and emotion. This was emotion. The good kind that meant his heart was working right for once. Tell her yes. They headed back down the trail. Barron walked between them, no leash needed. The dog knew the way home now. Ruth's house, with its crooked porch and kitchen that smelled like cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings, where Michael slept in what had been Caleb's room and woke each morning to Barron's cold nose nudging his hand. Tomorrow there'd be Jack's garage, where Tommy was finding his voice one word at a time. There'd be Tommy's speech therapy with Mrs. Rodriguez, who said the boy was making remarkable progress. Barron's physical therapy in Crawford's new pool. Coffee at Chen's diner where Michael had learned everyone's name, and they'd learned his was just Michael, not Mr. Harrison. Small things. Daily things. Things that mattered. The trail curved around a large boulder. Through the trees, Michael could see Cedar Falls spread out below. Population 2,401 now, according to the sign Jim Bradley had updated himself, adding Michael's number with the same care he'd once refused to help with. Barron stopped, looked back at the stump one more time, then continued walking. Forward, not back. "Mr. Harrison?" Tommy's voice, stronger now than even last month. "Yeah? I'm glad you stayed." Michael put his hand on the boy's shoulder, felt the solid warmth of him. Alive. Growing. "Me too, son." Barron barked once, just because he could. The sound echoed through the trees, strong and clear. They walked home as the sun broke through the clouds, painting everything gold. Connecting communities. I need to tell you something about Cedar Falls that wasn't in the official reports. After Michael recovered, after Barron could run again, after Tommy's voice grew strong, something else happened that no newspaper covered. It started with Mrs. Chen bringing soup to the Walsh house every Tuesday. Then, Jim Bradley began teaching free carpentry to kids who'd lost parents. Jack opened his garage on Saturdays for veterans to work on cars together. Not talking about war, just turning wrenches. Pastor Morrison started a monthly dinner where federal officers and locals sat at the same table. Even Patricia Banks came, out of uniform, just Patricia. Angela Sterling used her legal knowledge to help 5 families save their homes from foreclosure. Judge Coleman established a fund for emergency veterinary care, naming it after Rex, both Sterling's childhood dog and Barron. Michael didn't orchestrate any of this. He just stayed. Walked Barron every morning, worked at Jack's garage every afternoon, ate at Ruth's table every evening. The billionaire who'd moved thousands of employees like chess pieces now moved nobody but himself. One morning, Tommy asked him, "Was losing everything worth finding this?" Michael watched Barron chase butterflies, healthy and whole. "I didn't lose anything," he said. "I just finally learned what was worth keeping." Disclaimer: this work is inspired by a story created solely for entertainment purposes. This narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior toward animals, people, or property. The story does not encourage illegal acts, including destruction of protected federal resources. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. The medical procedures described are fictional and should not be considered veterinary advice. No animals were harmed in the creation of this story. This is a work of fiction, meant to explore themes of compassion, community, and redemption through storytelling.